Hello, guys. Thanks for tuning in. This is the 5 Yards 5. Me, Ali Maxwell, him, George Ellick. We are 5 Yards ambassadors, and we get together once a week, even if it's a busy Christmas period, to chat all things 5 Yards, to flag up a few players that have taken our fancy on site, and just to chat things through with you guys, really. A really busy transfer window yesterday on Tuesday the 22nd, and a reminder to you guys that the next two Fridays will not see a transfer window as usual. It'll be the next two Thursdays. So Thursday the 24th, Christmas Eve, and Thursday the 31st, New Year's Eve, along with the usual Tuesday transfer window on the 29th. George, people certainly not clocking off for Christmas when it comes to 5 Yards. Yesterday was a busy day for those buying and selling.
Yeah, not driving home for Christmas nor clocking off for Christmas in 2020. It was busy, and four players had 100% bought of them in yesterday's transfer window. So people buying as much as they possibly could, positively filling their trolleys full of these players. And nice EFL strand to them as well. Morgan Gibbs-White, the only player not contracted to an EFL club, but of course on loan at Swansea from Wolves. So gutsy 100% by that one, given he hasn't played for Swansea in a couple of months due to injury, but he did make a very, very good start of it under Steve Cooper. Alex Mighton, who scored his first league goal for Nottingham Forest last weekend, a very exciting young player for Forest. Joel Randall, a player that we are very excited about at Exeter, a left-sided 21-year-old forward who, he's having a pretty landmark season for his first professional senior campaign for Exeter, and a player that I know basically nothing about in Dan Butterworth, a striker at Blackburn Rovers, not getting much game time whatsoever. Not surprising given the attacking players that Blackburn have at their disposal. But somebody's seen Butterworth's price and thought to themselves, you know what, that is too low, and they've got involved.
Yeah, love that. I heard you were saying yesterday that you went to the supermarket and bought 100% of the pigs in blankets. So again, people just backing their opinion all over on 5 Yards and outside of it as well. I'm going to talk about the first player today, and I want to talk about Rafinha of Leeds. What a lovely, rangy winger he is. Leggy and skillful and dynamic.
He likes to shoot.
And he does like to shoot. And he's settling in very, very well to life in the Premier League, to life under Marcelo Bielsa at Leeds, at a speed, I would say, that has caught my eye. Now, for two reasons. Firstly, adapting to the Premier League in general is not easy. He's come from France, of course, and it's impressive the way that he is impacting games already, the way that he is, clearly catching the eye with his attacking output, but also just, we've been following Bielsa at Leeds for a good few years now, and to actually make it into their first team quite so quickly is impressive. Bielsa's whole philosophy on new signings is that until they're up to speed with his intense training regime, they simply won't be starting games. And so for him to be in the team basically a month after joining, really impressive. He came on at half-time against Palace, and since then he's started every single game. That's 6 in a row. He's only been subbed off once as well, which I think speaks volumes to his physical attributes, which is so important in a Bielsa system for an attacking player like him. He's playing full 90s almost all the time. So lots to like initially from what we've seen about Rafinha. But I'm going to lean on a scout report by Sam Tighe here. Now, Sam is the football expert, and it's so good to have him both as a scout on 5 Yards and as someone that I can sort of check in with every now and again on these players across Europe, because he's got such a good eye for talent. And he loves Rafinha. In fact, I think he used his initial player request on Rafinha. And as soon as Rafinha went on site at 35 million, there was Sam writing a scout report about him. And it's one of the best I've seen on site, and it's definitely prompted me to get involved with Rafinha, so to speak. Now he's up to speed, writes Sam. He looks frightening, driving at defenders with the ball, getting into the box to challenge at the back post, teasing good deliveries into the box, and threatening a lethal strike on goal. He's also said shades of Alexis Sanchez. He said, remember when Sanchez used to combine an elite threat level in
when
attack?
He was good.
And yes, when he used to combine an elite threat level in attack with the sort of work rate that saw him regularly end up defending next to his own corner flag, that's what Rafinha is reminding Sam of. He also says that Angel Di Maria is a nice comparison. That makes a little more sense in terms of the left-footedness and the sort of height and ranginess that I touched on earlier. the most exciting thing for me, far be it from me to be predicting a next move already after only a couple of months at Leeds. But as Sam mentions, his modern skill set and raw energy make him a fairly system-proof player. So anyone would suit him, basically. Liverpool as a post-Salah option isn't out of the question if he continues to develop at this rate. So I saw that. I saw his price of £35 million. And I think for a 24-year-old winger who's just made it to the Premier League and looks like he is there to stay, I think that's low enough to be pretty attractive as a price for Rafinha. So I want a piece of the pie. And it's brilliant, and it just shows the beauty of 5 Yards is finding scouts like Sam, whose opinions you trust, not only backing your own opinions, but using those of others to help build your squad. So there are plenty of other good scouts on there, and do go and check out the scouting department on site and see what catches your eye. I'll be shifting someone else from my squad, George, on Christmas Eve when the transfer window is open to make way for some Rafinha. There you go.
I'm going to try and not get emotional in my one here, because it's a player who means a hell of a lot to me. If you're watching this and don't have any idea who I am, then totally fair enough. That's probably most people. But Jack Grealish is a player that I kind of fell in love with about 4 years ago when Villa were in the EFL. It was actually a game between Villa and Leeds that you and I watched together in a sports bar in Victoria, where I think it was the first time I'd seen him play 90 minutes in the Championship. And I just couldn't really kind of believe what I was seeing in terms of the technical ability of a player playing at that level. And, you and I have watched a lot of EFL football. Interestingly, 5 Yards founder, Guy Rogers, actually came up to me when we were both working at Squawker, probably about 5 years ago, and said, "What do you think of Jack Grealish?" And I said, he's just a show pony. He falls over the whole time, isn't he? And he was like, I don't think so. I think he might be like incredible. And I was like, okay, all right, mate. You get back to your spreadsheets. I'm going to crack on over here. And the Grealish thing became a kind of not an obsession, but I think part of the reason why 5 Yards is great is because these days it doesn't matter who you support. Once you see a talent that you believe in, it kind of encompasses your whole footballing enjoyment. Like right now, even to this day, I support Oxford, but if Aston Villa are playing, I will watch Villa because of Grealish. Like when you and I were at Wembley watching Villa get promoted in the playoff final against Derby, I was actively nervous because the player that I support the most in the world and rate was playing that day. Now, because I've been fairly vocal about my thoughts on Grealish on Twitter forever, it means I've seen all the criticisms leveled at him over time. He spends his whole time on the ground. He holds onto the ball too long. Where are the goals and the assists? And bit by bit, he's basically made a mockery of anybody who's ever doubted him. On 5 Yards, he is valued at 46 million. Now, it's frustrating for me that 5 Yards didn't exist 4 years ago, because let's be honest, I wouldn't have to do this video. I wouldn't be working anymore. I'd have bought 100% at whatever price, and I'll be sitting on it now, very, very pretty. He is being linked to a move in January. In the last 24 hours, he's been linked to Liverpool. He's been linked to Manchester City. He's been linked to Manchester United. And there should be no surprise of that whatsoever at all. Jordan Ricks is the only person who's written a scout report so far. He has him as current ability 82, potential ability 94. Now, I think that is wrong, because I don't think he's got a great deal more in terms of how he's going to improve. In my opinion, Grealish has usurped the level that I thought he could get to, even back in the day when I thought he was going to be a great Premier League player. I now think that with the right move, seamlessly playing at his current level, he will be one of the elite players in world football very, very quickly. And the one criticism that I could level at him is his finishing ability. And I don't know if that will ever improve. We still see so often he gets himself into good goal scoring opportunities and he snatches at shots. He very often hits the ball wide or over the bar, or sometimes kind of misstrikes them in a way that you wouldn't think a player of that ability would do. But he still will score goals. And I think in a good team, that will improve further. The other criticism we're now seeing of him by those people who seem completely intent on not rating Jack Grealish is that when he goes to a side with better players, he'll go missing. Absolute nonsense. When he has the space where teams aren't doubling up on him, I think we'll just see a new output unleashed in him as well. The comparisons to Gascoigne are made fairly regularly with Grealish, and I think that's wrong. I mean, I would compare him closer to the likes of Messi and Maradona, the way that he carries the ball and dribbles with the ball. I'm not saying he's as good as them, and certainly he lacks the goal-scoring touch that Messi has. But just in terms of the style of play and where he could get to, sadly, the best comparison with Gascoigne will be if he doesn't get this big move that he so deserves. It is the 23rd of December right now. And, Villa fans will not want me to be saying this, but I really think that if Grealish gets his move in January, which is probably unlikely, I think they will probably do their absolute best to keep hold of him until the summer. Then that 46 million for a guy who I anticipate will be in every conversation going forward for who is the best attacking players in European football will look very, very cheap indeed. The hype around Grealish has built up. He's no longer, the most underrated player in the game as I thought, but I do think there's still value with him on 5 yards, given that he hasn't got that move yet. And it's no surprise for those people out there who still are asking, where are the goals? Where are the assists? You got Jurgen Klopp, you got Pep Guardiola, you got Manchester United, all massive fans of this guy. He's destined for the very top, and we've seen it with England already. Still some value there on Jack.
Compelling emotional case being made there.
I'm going to cry.
We're going to move on to a player that we wouldn't be touching at the moment, a sell, if you will, or just someone to leave alone. And as it seems to be each week, I'm picking one of the best players in the world right now in Kevin De Bruyne of Manchester City. And I think the reason why it's valuable to talk about these players in this way is it gets us thinking about how to win 5 yards, basically, and how to build our squad going forward, and the sort of things you have to be thinking about when you are looking at players that you love, like you with Grealish and like me with De Bruyne, but maybe saying, actually, that's not one for my squad. I don't think that will be valuable for me in the long run. He's 78 million on 5 yards right now, De Bruyne, and I feel nervous just saying it, but I just don't think that from now until the end of his career, he'll get towards 78 million pounds of performance pay. And that's really what you're after, because regardless of who the player is, once they hit 30, their value is likely to start to decline and very, very, very unlikely to rise. So you're not making money on De Bruyne in your squad as a future asset, like you might do with someone like Michael Olise, who you might say, well, he is just purely, even if he doesn't rack up performance pay, he is going to rise in price, and therefore I will make money on this asset, if you will. It's obviously unlikely to happen with a player who at the end of this season will turn 30. The end of his career is in sight, let's say. Now, I'm not saying it's upon us, but yeah, it's an interesting one. Last year, he had an incredible season, didn't he? In performance pay terms in the Premier League, it's hard to imagine him or anyone really doing much better than 59 PP returns. That was across wins, goals and assists. He got 8 in the Champions League, and that made 12.6 million in PP for the season. So if we use that as a season where it feels unlikely to me he would ever get much more than that based on the position that he plays, he would need to do that exact season 6 more times to get to around 78 million pounds. And as I say, I just don't see that necessarily happening. You're always a little worried about KDB injury-wise as well. Like, I don't have him down as an injury-prone player or someone with physical issues that hold him back. But the intensity with which he plays, and we've seen a fair few times over the course of his career in England, dodgy falls on his knee and, meaty tackles where his ankle gets crushed. Like, I would be really nervous holding KDB, because at that price, one big injury and you'd be in big trouble. Now, he could be a key man for City well into his 30s, of course. Maybe with a tweak to his role, he could move further back and be more of a deep lying player. I guess he could move further forward and be like a number 10 that doesn't have a huge amount of defensive responsibilities. But yeah, the way that he plays does make me concerned for his long-term health. And yeah, as I say, tough to imagine his value would rise from this point. And you don't want to be holding on to players in your squad whose value is dropping. That's not a good place to be. So you might think in pure PP terms, he would be a good shout. And potentially with City having a good draw in the Champions League against Gladbach, if you really wanted to be on the KDB train, maybe a short-term hold for a couple of months could be the one, because if they go deep in the Champions League, you could see him picking up a fair amount of PP from that. But For me, long term, even though he's one of my favourite players in world football, I definitely don't want to be a KDB owner, and certainly not at the 78 million that he's on the platform for. So there you go. What have you got for me, George?
I've got a player in the EFL who kind of had his name in lights last night in the Carabao Cup semi-final. It is Josh Da Silva of Brentford, scoring the goal to send Brentford through to the Carabao Cup semi-finals. And he's a player who, you and I have, well, I was going to say you and I have liked for a long time. I don't want to embarrass you, but I do remember there was a time about 18 months ago, and we all get things wrong sometimes, where you said to me, Josh Da Silva, I'm just not sure I'm really having him. But I do think we've seen him improve a hell of a lot since then. And he's kind of, he was signed from Arsenal, so he's got that kind of elite academy technical ability that is so clear to see. And he's somebody who makes playing football look incredibly effortless. He's got a very long stride. He covers the pitch well. His passing is very good. He scores fantastic goals. A player with some serious long-range shooting ability. He's on 5 yards at the moment at 14 million, which I think is low because he's a player who will appeal to sides further up the pyramid. And he's also playing for a side in Brentford who I expect to be a Premier League side come next season. Because under Thomas Frank, after, Brentford often have a slow start to the season. The difference was in their slow start to the season this season, they won loads of games. And now they seem to be really hitting their stride and picking up points pretty regularly. One of the best things about 5 yards, in my opinion, is how you can follow certain scouts. And in Joe Morgan, we have a scout who is proving himself very quickly to be one of the best on the game. His scout rating is 83, but he's made £175 million pounds worth of profit on his scout reports so far on 5 yards. That is showing somebody who knows where value is. And he has a buy for Da Silva. He recommended him at 13 million. Interestingly, though, in the scout report itself, he says that the club he think he'd be perfect for would be Leeds United. I'm not sure about that. I don't think that Da Silva has the pressing mentality that maybe we'd want to see from a player going into that Leeds midfield. He does, however, have the languid technical strength to play in basically any Premier League side. And he is someone, I've mentioned it recently, where in the EFL we often see players go up to the Premier League, but to clubs whose ability isn't way above where they're moving on from. Ollie Watkins going to Aston Villa, Jared Bowen going from Hull to West Ham. They're making one step up, not two. And I think that Silva could be an interesting one who could go up straight into a side who are challenging for Europe towards the top end of the table. He's someone we often talk about, players who you want to have both good dribbling ability and good passing ability. He's certainly that as well. Holds onto the ball really, really well. He scores goals and assists, which is important for PP. He's just a player that I really like. I think with 5 yards, as a rule, if you look to basically buy every Brentford player when they get put up onto the game, you're probably going to do okay because they know who they're signing. If our analysts are doing their job properly, they should know that and be factoring probably in like a Brentford's tax on top of players. But with 14 million for Da Silva, a 22-year-old who's progressing very, very quickly, I can't really see the downside here at all. An EFL player to definitely get on board with because he's not going to be an EFL player for very long.
The Brentford Premium. I'm going to talk about a couple of players who are going up on site on Christmas Eve, ready for the Christmas Eve transfer window. I won't name every single one, but just to pick out a couple of names that stand out for me. Outside of the EFL, you've got players like Gianluca Scamacca going up on site, Jonathan Bamba. You've got Silas Wamangituka as well, of course. We had to get him up given his recent form. But there's a ton of EFL players, and these have proven to be really popular players for you guys to request on 5 yards, which is great to see because too often, the EFL gets sort of glossed over, whereas we know, and you guys know as well, that in terms of pathways for young players to reach the very top, this is the place to be in many ways in English football. And so we've got so many players on there already, but going up, which might tickle your fancy on Christmas Eve. Akin Famewo, Antoine Semenyo is a really interesting one, certainly for Bristol City fans who've been really excited about some of his performances in the last few months, but so many others. Josh Knight, Josh Martin, Christian Bielik, who's one of my favourite players in world football. Not quite at Grealish levels of love that you have, but not a million miles away. Marcus Harness, Matthew Sorinola, League One players. Loads of guys going up on site. I'm just going to flag up a pair of left backs, Harry Pickering of Crewe Alexandra and Rico Henry of Brentford. Both of these guys are, I reckon, 22, 23 years old. Pickering's actually about to turn 22, and I think Henry might be 1 or 2 years older. But they've both played a ton of EFL football at left back and have the maturity in their game that sort of belies their young years. And it's come from game time that guys in elite academies simply don't have. And it's probably the biggest, it's the biggest, the biggest thing that young players in the EFL have over their counterparts at elite academies is that if they are good enough, they can have 50 to 100 senior appearances by the time they're 22. And that's very, very rare in the Premier League. And it makes a big difference to how players develop. Pickering, I'm interested to see what he goes up on the platform because he's playing for a Crewe side in League One. He's catching the eye each week with his performances. It seems widely accepted, sadly for Crewe fans, that at some point over the next year or two, this great group of young players that they have is going to start being picked apart. They might start with Ng and Wintle, and Pickering might follow on, but he will be on the radar of absolutely every team in the Championship and, dare I say, in the Premier League as well, just because of how much he stands out at that level and has done for a while now. And Rico Henry, you talk about Brentford players. It's another one that they've just absolutely smashed it. He missed a whole year through injury, so he could have even more senior appearances under his belt. But I think he played all 46 games last season, so you wouldn't be too worried about his about any impact on that big injury that he had 2 years ago. Just a really good modern fullback. He's small. That's probably the biggest issue about him is his size. Could he be exploited at the back post by taller attacking players? Yes, possibly, but we don't see that happen too often in the Championship. His speed is what stands out to him. His recovery speed means that it's almost impossible to find a clip of him being like rinsed down the wing, a winger just burning him for pace or doing him for skill. He's tenacious and quick. And going forward, he's not the most exciting attacking left back. His delivery is not incredible. But again, the technical level to be able to play in the Brentford attack will probably translate to a higher level. And the interesting thing about Rico is, and Pickering, I guess, might seem far-fetched, but left back is not a position of great strength for England. As you have said many times, people roll their eyes when you predict EFL players to play for England in the future. But it doesn't take very long once they reach the Premier League, once they perform for half a season. It doesn't take very long for that to flip completely. And then people can get quite excited about the potential for these guys to play for England. So probably, depending on their price, 2 players that I would look at very closely when they go on 5 yards today or tomorrow. You'll find a full list of players going on site on the 5 Yards Twitter account. Please do give us a follow because it's a great place for all information about 5 Yards. We hope you're enjoying it. Hope you get involved in the transfer windows on Christmas Eve, on Tuesday, and on New Year's Eve as well. Thank you for watching this week's 5x5. Let me know what you think. Let George know what you think about Jack Grealish. And we'll talk again soon. Go well, everyone.
Nice.